He's the de facto offensive coordinator. They are running New England's offense, not Bruce Arians' offense. And he's a pseudo personnel executive. Alex Guerrero, who obviously got into, was kind of a divisive force in New England, not only has an office in the Tampa Bay Bucs building, but he got a Super Bowl ring. And so I think that like things are just different for him now. And, at this point, he knows more about offensive football than most head coaches. And, I think that he's in a place where they welcome his input, even if he's not obviously making final decisions on things.
Got my bud Jeff Kerr going in for Johnny Mac today. J Mac will be on about a half an hour from now. He's got COVID testing for the Eagles this week, so we'll punch him up as a guest rather than a co-host. We're waiting on our first guest. So we're hoping that Seth Wickersham jumps aboard soon. Investigative reporter for ESPN has decided to put all that work to use and put it underneath a hardcover. He's got a book out about the Patriots and their dynasty and the relationship between the triumvirate of big achievers and big egos up in New England. Mr. Kraft, Mr. Belichick, and Mr. Brady. Well, only 2 out of 3 are still there, and that's one of the storylines we'll go down with. Seth Wickersham, ESPN investigative reporter, whose new book, It's Better to Be Feared, is out and on better bookshelves everywhere for you sports fans out there. I do believe it's one of those books because they have been such an accomplished team that it's not all just about the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're a football fan, then this is a story you're probably going to want to read. You can make note of the big game between the Eagles and the Patriots, and I know that's one of the things that Seth has been able to incorporate in his book. I see he's almost ready to join us, so why don't we punch him up? Seth, Jordan McDonald, and Jeff Kerr here from Eagles Birds 365. Thanks for joining us today.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing good, Seth. I guess I'll start out with the first question here. So about that Malcolm Butler benching in Super Bowl 52, we never really seemed to get an answer until your book came out.
Oh, thank you. And there's still some mystery involved, but before the game, Malcolm Butler got sick, and that's public knowledge. And during practice, in the lead up to that week, and in the lead up to that game, he really just didn't seem locked in. And he got into a screaming match with Matt Patricia, who was the defensive coordinator at the time. And Patricia just seemed more down on him than even Belichick did. And so they sat him. And I think that it's one of the most interesting things is that, Bill Belichick has been around a lot of difficult players that have posed some management challenges during his career. You think back to like Lawrence Taylor and all of the things that are legendary now that Lawrence Taylor did at night. But I think that not being locked in before a Super Bowl was an unforgivable sin. And then after the game, in which Malcolm Butler famously didn't play, he was talking to the teammates who were like, what happened? What was going on there? And he said, these dudes, these MFers. And he was not referring to his teammates. He was referring to the coaches.
Understood. And it's kind of, and I know it's so hard to judge locked in. Probably Bill Belichick can judge it better than anybody else on the planet, but you never get 100% in a guy's head. And he did kind of have a big play that kind of delivered a Super Bowl to the Patriots previously. I guess it wasn't enough goodwill for them to excuse the fact that he might not have been, quote unquote, locked in for that Super Bowl still to this day. I think it's just stone cold strange. Through your evaluation, Belichick make that call? Patricia make that call? Did Patricia have to talk Belichick into it? How did it actually play behind, as best you could uncover, behind the scenes to not play him?
I understood why they demoted him. Now, why they didn't play him when the Eagles were clearly having so much success in that game offensively, that I'll never understand. And that's clearly a Bill Belichick decision. But remember, he made the big play in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. And there were some issues with his contract and showing up to camp on time in the subsequent years. Like at one point, the NFLPA had to get involved. And I think that in the Super Bowl, when the Patriots played the Falcons, Butler got beat deep in that game. And I think that the coaches just seem to give up on him. I mean, I think that that's the gist of it. But really, that Super Bowl was really fascinating, and it was interesting to look at because there have been a lot of problems in the building for the Patriots during that 2017 season. You had Tom Brady wanting, pushing his TB12 business. You had Alex Guerrero in the middle of it all, and Belichick curtailing his access around the building. In the middle of it all, you had Brady wanting a contract until he was age 45, and the Patriots just not really willing to go there. And, you had Jimmy Garoppolo, who Belichick didn't want to trade and ended up having to trade at the last minute. And then they go and play the Eagles. And I mean, that defensive game plan was a mess. The coaches agreed, for instance, that, they needed to make Nick Foles beat them. But how they were doing it, there was some disagreement on it. And in the second quarter, especially when the Eagles were just able to run the ball at will, it was obvious that the defensive game plan wasn't working. And at halftime during that game, actually, the lights went out in the Patriots locker room as Justin Timberlake was performing. And the coaches had to use their phones to try to light things up. And Ernie Adams was in Bill Belichick's face saying, like, why are we in light personnel? What the hell are we doing? Because the Eagles were just gashing through New England's defense. And, New England ends up putting up 600 yards of offense and still loses and doesn't even punt. And later that week, when the Patriots returned to Foxborough and had a team meeting, Brady told people he wasn't returning.
Was that the year 2017 where everything just kind of went south between Brady and Belichick, or was it building up to that point?
No, it was a real turning point. I think that, like I said, they won their 5th Super Bowl together, and Tom just wanted to be known as more than New England's quarterback. He pushed this business, his TB12 business, really hard. And, Belichick made resoundingly clear that Alex Guerrero did not work for the Patriots. And when asked if he was going to read the TB12 method, Tom Brady's book, Belichick said, I see Tom every day. I don't think I need to read a book. I mean, he was really dismissive of that. And in the middle of it, you had Jimmy Garoppolo, who Belichick was deeply invested in. And then you also had Brady wanting this contract. And, there was at one point he and Belichick talked about the contract till he was age 45. And that meeting ended in a blow up. Kraft was like kind of involved. The Krafts didn't know if Belichick was actually going to return that year, after the 2017 season. And so there was even in the offseason after that Super Bowl, Brady, he skipped the entire voluntary offseason program and actually asked Kraft for his release. And Kraft declined to give him his release because they had just traded Garoppolo. So they were kind of invested in Brady's in Brady as their future. And then Kraft changed his mind and ended up allowing Brady to be released, but then Brady didn't want it. Anyway, fast forward to August of 2019. Brady still wants a contract until he's age 45. At this point, Belichick and Brady have 6 Super Bowl rings together. There's another contentious contract negotiation where the Patriots just kind of see Brady as a year-to-year player. Brady almost leaves training camp in protest because he was so frustrated. He ends up signing a 1-year deal with the Rays and an out to allow him to be a free agent. And 48 hours after he signed that deal, he and Gisele Bündchen put their house on the market.
I remember that. That was wild. And I remember your long investigative article on ESPN about it. I said, damn, how do they keep winning Super Bowls if they've got all this infighting going on up there? Was pretty amazing. And I know you noted this. I don't remember if it was in the article. You noted here in the book. And certainly it has played itself out since Brady has relocated to Tampa. How big a part of it was that Tom kind of wanted a seat at the player personnel table, that he was continually taking deals below market value? How high can you go for the GOAT, the greatest of all time? Well, he always took a little bit less, so the Patriots would have some flexibility to keep adding talent to the team. But he was never consulted or brought in on how they're going to use that money that Tom Brady is saving them. When he went to Tampa, yeah, I'm bringing in Gronk. Yeah, I'm bringing in Antonio Brown. He surely has a lot to say. How big a part of the separation between he and the Patriots was just that?
Well, I think that it was a factor. Tom and the contracts had really been an issue since maybe, 2010 or so. Brady was tired of taking these. At that point, Brady was kind of tired of taking these team-friendly deals. And that was when the Patriots were just kind of coming up short in Super Bowls and getting bounced in the playoffs by the Ravens and the Jets. And it just, nobody knew if, what the future of that team was. They had kind of plateaued at an incredibly high level. And, Brady had a contentious contract negotiation that year. And then you have 2013 where he signs another below market deal. And then Wes Welker leaves for the Broncos. He thought he did it to try to help someone like Wes Welker get re-signed. And then Belichick lets Wes Welker go. And I think he did want to have he wanted to be a little bit more than just a quarterback. And I think that, a couple of weeks ago, Alex Guerrero said, Belichick failed to evolve to account for what Tom Brady had become. And I don't know if that's quite fair. I think he did, but it was within the context of Belichick's program. So Brady was always going to have a ceiling in New England. And look at the roles that he has in Tampa. I mean, at one point when he was leaving New England, he told Joe Montana, he goes, they ask my advice, I give it, and then they don't do anything with it. And, in Tampa, he is the quarterback of the team. He's the de facto offensive coordinator. They are running New England's offense, not Bruce Arians' offense. And he's a pseudo personnel executive. Alex Guerrero, who obviously got into, was kind of a divisive force in New England, not only has an office in the Tampa Bay Bucs building, but he got a Super Bowl ring. And so I think that things are just different for him now. And, at this point, he knows more about offensive football than most head coaches. And, I think that he's in a place where they welcome his input, even if he's not obviously making final decisions on things.
Now, how does Bob Kraft handle this Brady-Belichick divisiveness? Because, Bob loved Bill the first stint he was in New England when he was under Parcells, and he made sure he brought him back to New England. And then you got a guy who was drafted and won you 6 Super Bowls. How does he pick a side in all this?
Yeah, and in some ways, I think he mostly did it masterfully, right? I think that he was trying to keep the band together as long as he possibly could. But that doesn't mean that it didn't come without, managerial headaches. I mean, Kraft has told people that, when the Patriots were first winning, at the beginning of their Super Bowl run, Belichick would still kind of kiss his rear end every now and then. And then once they really started winning and Belichick became a future Hall of Famer, that didn't happen. And, you have Nick Caserio, who is Belichick's top personnel executive, and Kraft would have to call him for information about the team. And sometimes, because Belichick wouldn't tell Kraft what was going on, and sometimes Nick Caserio didn't know what was going on either because Belichick wouldn't tell him. And there was this moment in 2018, where Kraft was at this kind of rich guys conference in Aspen. And he goes, I really hate leaving all these brilliant minds. And I got to go to Detroit to be with the biggest effing a-hole in my life, my head coach.
Nope.
All that said, though, these are really stubborn and type A personalities. And generally speaking, I think that Kraft did a masterful job at trying to, keep the egos in check as best he could. But, these guys, it didn't come without managerial challenges at times.
Seth's book, It's Better to Be Feared, available, came out last Tuesday for any football fan who wants to know the story behind the story with the New England Patriots and their dynasty. It is a must read. It's better to be feared. I can read into several possibilities. That's what you were trying to do with that title. If you can give us a nice little synopsis, you could probably talk about it for 20 minutes. We don't have 20 minutes.
Well,
driving forward, but behind the title when you came up with it.
Yeah, I mean, the saying, of course, is it's better to be feared than loved. And I just thought that fit them because especially after, during the first part of the run when they were winning Super Bowls, they were, it was easy to kind of get swept up in the romance of it all, right? You had this head coach that not many people thought could be successful. You had this quarterback who nearly went undrafted, and they kind of found each other, and this miracle happened. And then 2007 happens, and Spygate breaks. And America starts to look at these guys very differently. And I think that that's really when they kind of were able to, unleash their inner a-hole, if that makes sense. And I think that they kind of became a little bit more of who they were. I mean, during that season, remember, they were getting criticized for running up the score on teams. They did not care if anybody liked them. It was, that saying New England versus the world. That's what it was. And I think that, like, at that point, their bloodthirstiness came out in a way that we had never really seen on a football field in quite some time. And from then on out, it just kind of stayed with them. I mean, remember when Deflategate happened and all of the owners were looking, for Roger Goodell to pile on the Patriots for that as a makeup call for Spygate, because they felt like that Roger Goodell had been too lenient with Spygate and actually complicit in a cover-up when they stomped those Spygate tapes to pieces in a Gillette Stadium conference room. And so, the Patriots just kind of took on this persona and they kind of owned their darkness in a very interesting way. And so that's why I thought the title made sense.
Very good.
Yes, Seth. So I remember Super Bowl 39 very vividly, and that all the drama was with Philadelphia that week. Obviously, will T.O. play? Won't he play? I don't remember anything coming out of New England that week. I mean, the only drama we got was 3 years later with Spygate. Was anything going on in New England leading up to that game?
It was a pretty calm week. I thought one of the most interesting subplots that I get into a little bit in the book was, Jeffrey Lurie. And I didn't realize until I started reporting the book just how much losing out on the Patriots to Robert Kraft affected him. I mean, he essentially disconnected from the world and just went traveling for a long time. And, he was finally able to get the Eagles, and the Eagles were built in a phenomenal way. Remember, leading up to that Super Bowl, the Eagles and the Patriots had actually had identical regular season records in the years leading up to it. And the Eagles, obviously had made it to 4 straight NFC championship games. There's just that little difference about like what makes an A- team versus an A+ team, and nobody knows. But it was there. And before the game, Jeffrey Lurie and Robert Kraft were exchanging bro hugs and acting like they were best friends. But the coaches on the staff for the Eagles noticed that Lurie was very antsy leading up to the game, and he was like, we better not lose to this son of a bitch.
And the comparison between Donovan McNabb and Tom Brady had something to do with the results during all that period as well. All right, so I want to look ahead. You do a great job of looking back over the entire dynasty, 20 years. Brady leaves, 1-0 Brady. He wins the Super Bowl. Big Bill doesn't make the playoffs. It was a lopsided 1-0, as a matter of fact. And, oh, by the way, Brady well out in front again this year, although Mac Jones is looking okay to me. How long are Kraft and Belichick tied to each other? It seems like the relationship between Kraft and Belichick was actually more contested than Kraft and Brady, but it ends up that Brady goes elsewhere, and certainly part of it was Tom made his own decision to do that. Now you've got 2 of the 3 left still working it together in Boston. Are they tied to each other for as long as Belichick wants to coach? Is there going to come a point where if they're not going back to Super Bowls again, that he's actually going to step in and tell, sorry, Bill, you're no longer the coach of the Patriots? I know you got a big part of the book about who's next in line, the jockeying for position to step in when the Belichick era ends. When are those 2 going to split, or are they?
Well, I don't know. And I think that, nobody knows when Bill is going to walk away. And I think one of the most interesting things about Tom and Bill is that, yes, they're all, consumed by winning Super Bowls, but the Super Bowls are almost like an accident, like a byproduct of this larger obsession, because these guys could have exited like John Elway or, Tony Dungy at many points, and they keep going. Remember Tom Brady last year, they win the Super Bowl. His family runs onto the field, and the very first question Gisele Bündchen asks him is, what more do you have to prove? And Brady sidesteps it. He's like, I was trying to change the conversation, because in a weird way, he was already thinking beyond what they had just done. And, Belichick had once said, I'm not going to be like Marv Levy and coaching in my 70s. He loves to take shots at Marv Levy. But he's going to be 70 next April. And so it's going to be really interesting to see. I think that one of the things with Bill is that he's had an enormous amount of pride, and he never wanted to turn over a bad team to his successor. And a key ingredient of that is having them fixed up at quarterback. And it looks like Mac Jones at least has the potential to be that type of guy. And so I think that that's such a key ingredient that it does make me wonder if, Bill might walk away sooner rather than later. But the simple fact is that nobody knows.
Bill's had 6 interesting years in Cleveland, and his post-Brady record, or games without Brady, I think he's like 5-6 games under 500. Does he worry about his legacy and he can't win without this quarterback?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because obviously in Cleveland, he had a losing record and he had some extreme circumstances there, obviously. Then he goes 5-11 with Drew Bledsoe in New England and 0-2 to start the 2001 season. Then Brady comes in, and then during the year in 2008 that Brady mostly missed with his knee injury, and during 2016 when he was suspended, Bill wins games without Tom. Now Tom is gone. Last year, Bill kind of made excuse. He kind of gave an excuse. He was blunt. He just said, "Look, we sold out," and he kind of indicated that they needed a rebuilding year. But that's continued. It's unbelievable to me that the Patriots are winless at home this year after all the money that they spent, more money on guaranteed contracts in the offseason than Robert Kraft paid for the New England Patriots when he bought the team. And so I think that Bill burns if he loses a game. And I don't think he thinks that his accomplishments are being diminished by the week when Tom Brady is making winning look easy and all of a sudden it's really harder in New England. But it's hard to think that he doesn't notice it on some level, that the Bucs just keep moving on and New England is just coming up just short enough of the time. It is interesting. And but look, Bill made the decision on how to evaluate Tom Brady after the 2019 season, but Robert Kraft backed him. It was an organizational decision to let him open the door, to let him walk out, and he definitely walked out.
All right, Seth, last thing, and we know you got another interview to do, so thanks for your time today. They've got a commercial on TV now about Tom Brady and Giselle selling Bitcoin, jumping into the Bitcoin market, which I actually think is very well done. As a matter of fact, calling friends in the bar in Boston, you can't come back. When his playing career is over and done with, and who knows, maybe he gets another Super Bowl or two with Tampa, which will rub more salt in the wounds. But when his career is done, how will he be perceived by the Patriot faithful in Boston?
Well, they have to love him, right? I was at the game when the Patriots played the Bucs.
According to the Bitcoin commercial, they're never going to love him again. They'll buy the Bitcoin, but sorry, Tom, we're never going to love you again.
I would just have a hard time believing that the Patriots fans would be that spoiled. But I will say this, I was there for the game a couple of weeks ago, and they cheered for Brady during most of warm-ups. And then the Patriots, I don't think the TV cameras caught this, but the Patriots go to the locker room before kickoff. And the Bucs, led by Brady, go to the middle of the field and do a chant right on the Patriots logo at the 50-yard line. The fans definitely did not like that, and they booed him on the way out of there. All that said, he brought that fan base. He revolutionized Boston sports forever and redefined what it meant to be a quarterback there. And I would have a hard time if even salty Boston fans, didn't end up loving him in the end, no matter what.
The name of the book is It's Better to Be Feared. They tell all about the dynasty that was. Could it be rekindled under Belichick? We'll see. But the dynasty over the past 2 decades with the New England Patriots, Kraft, Brady, Belichick, their relationships. Great read if you're any kind of a football fan. Seth, we appreciate you jumping on board with us today. Thank you much. Best of luck with the book.
Thank you guys very much.
Our pleasure. Seth Wickersham, investigative reporter for ESPN. I remember the article that he did after the Eagles had beaten the Patriots in the Super Bowl in that offseason, and what that Super Bowl lead up did to the relationship between those 3 guys. They stuck it out. They won another Super Bowl, beat the Rams the year after, but it was irreparably damaged at that point. And now one of the parties has gone in separate ways, and he's doing okay in Tampa. Eagles got a first-hand look at it last Thursday night, as a matter of fact. All right, we'll come back. Jeff Kerr, Jody McDonald, your Birds 365 guys. John McMullen, the usual co-host, will step in to the guest spot. He joins us next here on Birds.